Thank you for your patience, Tom. Yeah.
The hour is 7 o'clock. Having arrived, I call this meeting the November 8th, 2023 meeting of the Columbia Borough Historical Architectural Review Board to order. Lori, could you please call the roll?
Certainly. Board Member Barley. Board Member Brandt.
Here.
Board Member Kerrigan.
Here.
Peter Kay.
Here.
Board Member Mountain.
Here.
Chairperson Lutz.
Here. If you will please rise for a moment of silence followed by the pledge of the flag. Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Did everybody have a chance to review the minutes from the September 13th, 2023 Harb meeting? Are there any alterations to the minutes, questions, concerns? Seeing none, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes. So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
Peter was the motion, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Move along to new business. I guess that's you. Jessica, would you please review the COA for 144 Locust Street for the board?
How does, what's the board's preference for how it gets reviewed?
Just kind of go through the
Just the
generic
background
from
and-
the packet.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, that's fair. So the case that's here before you, 144 Locust Street, is specifically what is being requested is a review for material changes to the porch roof, asphalt shingles to a metal roof, and a change to the materials for the porch railing from wrought iron to a wood with a large gauge like metal fence wire. The background of this case is that the applicant property owner submitted a zoning and building permit to the borough to do replacement windows, I believe. I'll have to look at this a little bit. We then went and did a follow-up inspection and found that the railing had been replaced, and that was felt at the time when that was identified. Staff present felt that that should have been reviewed by the Harb board, and thus a notice of violation was sent. And the applicant was told to prepare an application to submit to the Harb board for review. When that application was submitted, it also included the change in material for the roof. So that, I believe, is the background. Since this was to be on Harb's agenda for October, the October meeting had to be canceled because of not having quorum. In the meantime, Councilwoman Lintner had asked for staff to go through the background of how we approved the facade paint change. So I walked through that decision-making process. The property owner was given permission to paint the facade of the structure without having to go to the Harb board based on review of the ordinance. So that was provided. In the packet was also provided the borough's latest historic property survey review of this structure. And staff sort of concluded that, you know, based on the historic property, the historic property survey, specifically stating that features of the federal with Greek revival overtones had been radically altered with few original details remaining. and the facade is now faced with permastone, that the structure generally was felt to be a non-contributing structure based on the definitions that are not provided in the Harb District ordinance, but definitions that I found used elsewhere. So staff posed to the Harb Board that at issue is whether or not the Harb Board feels as though the material changes being requested for the porch roof and the porch railing are appropriate for a non-contributing structure in the Harb District. And if there are questions based on that review, I am happy to answer them.
Is the applicant here today?
I am.
Do you want to come up and maybe discuss?
Sure. Can I give you all additional photos or?
Sure. So, yeah, if you don't mind, walk us through what you have here.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome to use the podium.
So the first picture you'll see just a view from, let's take it just from across the street. Where you see 144 designated for the arrows out there. We were granted permission to paint the form stone. The next picture you'll see a little clearer picture of the current porch. So, just to clarify the terminology of wrought iron, that was not wrought iron that was there. Wrought iron would be an older, more historic feature that would have been maybe at some point in time on that property, but what was there was just an iron substance from Home Depot. So there's no type of historic value to the product.
The neighboring?
The neighbor has just a
Is it very
similar thing
similar
that
to that?
has been there, and it's just a Home Depot product.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing near to what was there in 1820 when the property was built. And I did spend several hours over at the Historic Society looking at back pictures, and what had been there that you could see was just a wooden porch. And that was back from the latest picture that they had was back from the 60s. So the third page would be an exact picture of the material for the metal roof. There's existing metal roof on the back porch, and this would just be metal roof on the existing porch roof. Shingles would still be on the rest of the roof. On the fourth page, you'll see other porches as you look north from my property up on Locust. So this is what I'm seeing. Obviously, there's nothing historic or attractive looking about that porch. Across the street would be the next page. You'll see a combination of 147 has a metal railing, and then the one next to it north of that would be a wooden railing. The next page you can see directly across my street, which is the old bar. They also do have a metal roof along with many boarded up windows. And the last 2 pages, or 3 pages, are just some before and after projects that I have done in Lancaster City and then again in Marietta. So the material that is on the current porch is wood and then like a metal railing that is coated. So it's rough.
Excuse me, can I have a clarification? You've already done the work, so this isn't asking prior to doing the work, you've already completed the porch, right?
Right, I was not aware that we needed. I had met with the person who had been in the position several times before starting on the project. First, to get dumpster permit, which they charge daily for the dumpster here. And then secondly, for the permission for the windows. So at no point in time was I even made aware that I needed a permit for the porch.
And it's clear that this is a review from Harb after the fact. So I think at play here is, obviously there's a fine that will be assessed for doing work without a permit. But I think at issue here for Harb is whether or not you feel as though those changes are appropriate for a non-contributing structure in the historic district. If you feel like it's fine, then I think we go along with the double permit fee, and that's that. If you feel like it is not fine, then remediative action needs to be taken, and the property owner may need to remove what is there and put back something that is more similar to the historic feature that was there. And when I say historic feature, I do not mean the material itself. What we are trying to protect in the Harb is the historic look and feel of the neighborhood. So though the original wrought iron has been disposed of already, it's really at issue to me, I think, is do you want, was the intent or was it necessary for this structure in order to be consistent with the Harb ordinance and the intent of the ordinance that a one-for-one replacement metal railing be put in? Or is it fine as is?
So I guess if I can ask a question. So I certainly understand the situation. And I think maybe, you know, it was my mistake to move forward and not realize that this was an issue or a concern. Honestly, I think when I just look at the neighborhood, I didn't even think for a second that there was any type of ruling or guidelines in existence, because the neighborhood certainly doesn't look like that.
Mm.
You know, that you can there's boarded up buildings across the street from me.
That's why we have a historic district ordinance to prevent that from happening.
Right, but as far as the work being done, like if you look on page 4, so that's an existing porch that we've done.
Done prior to the creation of our historic district ordinance.
And just to clarify, this is a picture of the
Correct.
current railing.
Yes.
That was, okay.
That's my clarification.
Do you have any other photos? Sorry. Is that the only image? It's another one.
Yeah, I ran out of it.
I just want to ask too, the materials that were used to build the porch, do you know what the wood is that you used to construct the porch?
It's composite wood.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I am.
So when you
The
said,
wood, you can see in the pictures, is unpainted, it's 2x4, simple, it's not an exterior wood that's in that picture, that's unpainted.
It is exterior composite. I assure you.
unpainted,
There's unpainted, but now it's painted.
it looks to me like it is painted here. So just to clarify, we're talking about a wood frame that's the rectangular shape?
Yes.
That's
the only thing
unpainted or painted?
So the only thing that is in metal is the mesh in between.
In between,
wood.
right,
Yeah.
and that's wood. This is,
Doesn't show clearly on the printed version.
These happens there.
that's what's currently here. And I think we're saying the frame, the wood is painted, right?
That is wood.
Yes, everything, yes.
But what's there is what they constructed, that's not what originally was
Right.
on the building.
Okay, I'm just. Well, first of all, I don't think I have any concerns with the standing seam metal roof that's proposed.
I definitely agree with that. I think the standing seam roof would dress it up and fit
Right.
better.
can I ask you questions just regarding the process? You mentioned that she required, a permit was required. What type of permit is required for the porch railing?
The porch railing, potentially just a zoning and building permit for $25, just so.
When you say building, are you saying UCC building permit?
Listen, I'm not sure that this meeting is the right meeting for us to do a deep dive on all of our processes.
I think it is
and-
right now because we have a citizen.
But here's-
Please don't interrupt me.
You
We
are-
have a citizen who is being threatened with fines and double permit fees, and I'm trying to get to the bottom, what permit? I think the citizen deserves an answer to that question.
Well, the permit that the borough currently issues is a joint zoning and building permit. So people come in, fill it out. If it's zoning related, it gets approved. If there's nothing structural in mind, it gets approved. A $25 fee is
I understand
assessed.
that.
If there is UCC related plan reviews and inspections necessary, then it goes to the UCC. Now, I understand everybody's frustration, but please, and this is one of the reasons why I don't know that we need to, if you feel as though it's not necessary, that is completely up to the Harb board. But please understand the situation that we're all working in. Other staff people issued these permits. Other staff people identified these violations. This is a continuation of a meeting that had been scheduled by other staff people. So I understand everybody's frustration. Believe me, I get it. This historic district ordinance is very difficult to administer just from the side of an individual who needs to be doing the enforcement. There is not a whole lot of guidance there. There's not a whole lot of direction. So if we feel as though these are things that don't even need to go to the Harb board, then we can take away the violation and there is no. Or if you want to approve it, the Harb board could make the recommendation that the violation be removed and that no double fee be assessed. But my point in saying this is, I don't know that this forum, while we're dealing with this appeal, is the deep dive that we need to go into, because you are looking at a hired consultant who is not at all familiar with all of your
I
processes and
understand that.
procedures.
So,
Go ahead, Jimmy, I'm sorry.
in the past, we have, and Nora probably remembers this basically an entire Harb board resigned over a railing issue in the past. We have
It's the alteration of a railing that clears the
right, we have
permit.
always
Answer his
considered
question.
porch railings from Harb. I myself at my former residence had to go through the Harb process to replace what she had with historically accurate wooden beams that would have been the original construction of my porch.
And I completely understand and I agree, but I think right now we're stuck with working with what we have. In our ordinance, the triggering section in this ordinance is 130-15. And it says any action requiring certificate of appropriateness is any action requiring a building permit or any act or process not requiring a building permit, but specifically listed in this chapter as a regulated activity requiring review. Porch railings are not listed as a regulated activity. In fact, the only two I can pick out off the top of my head are satellite dishes and replacement windows. And as I understand, there was not a building permit issued for that. There was plumbing and mechanical, and I get that. I think, it needs to be called out. We need to, and I think I just spoke to Sharon earlier about this, and she's going to be on top of it, I'm very sure. But we can only work with what we have right now. And
So my understanding, you just saying there is not a violation.
I don't even think it's something that should be in front of us right now. Because we don't have the legislative authority to do it. I mean, I'm going back to the legislation that gives us the power to review this. This is what gives the Borough Council the power to make their decision. It all falls back onto that.
I have to address this. This is driving me nuts. Absolutely, this requires a permit. It actually, according to what I understand, they were told to cease and desist or not keep going, but they did, is what I understand. Messina, before she left, said, hey, hold up. They continued to paint and finish the porch, and that was the end of it, is what I understand. But nevertheless, to answer your question. It's right, number 2 in the, section 21 of the ordinance. It says, you know, you're gonna remove any historic materials or you're gonna replace anything that can be seen from the property as far as, you know, characteristic features of the building. So, this is like the most common thing is a porch, because if someone's gonna alter the porch in the historic district, they absolutely have to have a review before the board.
That is, those are standards and guidelines. That's not legislative.
That's what triggers a permit, and that's
No,
what.
trigger the permit is 130-15. Action requires.
This is how, we have always, the Harb has always reviewed porches. That's the most characteristic feature.
What's been reviewed before doesn't make it right.
But
I'm going by
oh
what
my gosh.
legislative trigger is.
I wanted to mention that there is a section here that is 130-7 that describes alteration, and it does say that without limitation, the repair, application of paint to any previously unpainted building material or surface, replacement, which this would be a replacement of a railing. It says replacement, sorry, replacement, reconstruction, demolition, or relocation of any structure, object, or any part of any structure or object visible from a property's tax parcel street address.
That
So
is
I
a
don't
definition
see-
of alteration. I understand that, sir.
But I mean,
But that's not the
It
driving
says-
factor. The driving factor is 130-15. This is what gives us the
well then,
authority.
why would we have this definition that's clearly
defines
states
all-
it needs a hard review for replacement
That
of any
defines an
facade?
alteration if it required a review for action. The
But that's-
definitions are just definitions.
But these are the standards. It starts out by saying these are what are to be taken into consideration by the Harb and guided as the standards for Harb's review. These are the things that you're looking at as the standards why Harb is here to review. And that's what they review.
That's the standards, but still, what gives us the authority to review them?
I don't think this is a question, guys, that we're gonna be able to answer at this
And
meeting.
the-
Because, and let me finish, please.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The issue is that this is all of this, all of the Harb district ordinance, the enforcement powers are all tied to the zoning ordinance. In order for us, there will be 2 opposing sides, we're gonna need our borough solicitor to help.
This person, these
No, you are not letting me finish.
papers have come in here all the time.
We have, listen to me, we have decency standards that we need to adhere to here. We cannot have folks talking over one another, and we have to be able to run this meeting appropriately. What I am saying in terms of process, in terms of interpretation, in terms of questions with the ordinance, we need assistance. We are gonna go back and forth like we're playing volleyball, trying to figure out how the processes and what legally should be done. Our question here is, do we feel as though these changes are appropriate? We can back out violations, we can get rid of double permit fees, there doesn't have to be any sort of penalization going on if we don't want there to be. But the basic question for this property owner who is trying to improve their property is, does the Harb Board feel as though these alterations are appropriate for a non-contributing structure in the Harb district? Period, stop. Now, outside of this case, absolutely, we need to if we don't have cases, Harb needs to be meeting, we need to have an interpretation by the solicitor. And what I will say is that right now, I am working with the Planning Commission to make amendments to the zoning ordinance. Historic district ordinance is no different. Yes, it needs an absolute rewrite, but there are changes, there are administrative and housekeeping changes that we could be writing right now in order to help make these decisions clearer. So what I would propose is that we help this woman get through this case, and then if we keep talking at this meeting, we can, or we so far don't have an agenda yet for the next Harb meeting. These can be things that we can research, prioritize, bring to the table, and then review with actual information at our disposal, if that makes sense to everyone.
My only question is, if we say this is okay, then is it a precedent? Can anybody just You know, if they're railing and
Nope.
put up anything they want.
Nope, it's not.
That's arbitrary.
The precedent has already been established over roughly 20 years of Harb existence that we review porch railings.
I'm just saying, you're not legally, I'm not an attorney, but I'm a planner and I do this stuff all day. I know from a zoning hearing board standpoint, just because a decision gets made, you're not setting a precedent until legally you take it to a court and the judge says you set a precedent. So no, I don't think you're setting a precedent.
Can I ask a question? Is there a map, a diagram that says which properties are in non-contributing classification?
No.
So who makes that decision? How?
And that's a really great question. So, recently what the borough did, and some of you, Althea, you know this, who else was on that list? It doesn't matter. So, the borough last year, got their CLT, what is that called?
Certified local government.
Thank you. Certified Local CLG designation with the Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission, the PHMC. What we did was we applied for funds, we got funds to do a third of this historic survey, to redo the historic survey to identify contributing and non-contributing structures. So what we're doing right now is getting ready to have council, I think at their last November meeting, vote on, who that selected consultant will be for the first, year of that work. That's when we're gonna update it. That's when we're actually gonna get a GIS layer and a map that identifies the contributing structures. So that's how we're gonna do it.
When she came in to get her permit, it was the person who issued that, which would have made the decision because, it's covered in formstone and stuff like that. So it really isn't a historical property for somebody who's looking at it, correct? That's how you
Based on the research that I did, and again, this is research and there's a lot of opining, the case was made that potentially in downtown Baltimore, where the formstone was created and was used as a cheap alternative to resurfacing buildings, it could be considered historic there. But if it's one-offs here and there, the general thought process, not that it's right or wrong, but that's the research that I found, was that generally speaking, permastone, it's already replaced the original facade of the structure. It's already over top of the brick or whatever else was there. And let me go, hold on a second, let me go into a little bit more detail here, because there's actually a reason why this happens and it's interesting. So part of the Harb ordinance, all of the Harb ordinance is meant to preserve the historic nature of our historic area. But part of that is also to protect the structure from deterioration. So the reason that those regulations are in the Harb ordinance is not to maintain the same material. We do not want original masonry covered with anything because it traps in moisture and it leads to deterioration of the structure. The caveat is that permastone is not the original masonry. That moisture trapping, that's all done. It's not going to happen again, and therefore, whether it's permastone or brick, you're maintaining the historic aspect of that structure because you are not letting freeze-thaw moisture deteriorate the actual envelope of the structure. The permastone, it's already done. The structure's been sealed. There's no moisture freeze-thaw going. There is no danger of that. Ergo, I don't see it's an issue to paint permastone.
Well, permastone usually gets painted because it leaks.
There you go.
So, I mean, what I don't understand is I understand why the permits were issued. Because somebody made that decision, but you don't have a map saying that this is where it's supposed to be. So if they're freshening up the look of this house to make it look better than being in a neighborhood with boarded up windows. So she did have a permit to change the windows. She did have a permit to paint it. And we're gonna put metal on the front roof. So it's cleaning up the look of the property. So is the contention by everyone the ironwork, or is it because of the work that's been done? But I believe she did pull permits for everything.
I
thousands. Do you have the amount there in permitting that I
She-
paid?
No, I don't, but she, I was asked a question, so let me answer his question and we'll go back to it. So, this is a permit was issued and a staff person went out, saw work being done that wasn't included in the permit, knowing that it was in the Harb district. They issued a notice of violation and said that she needed to get a permit to include the railing change. And then when that permit was submitted, it was also submitted with additional information for the roof. Does that,
Yes, I completely, yeah, now I'm following.
okay, you're just, okay.
Because I was kind of thinking that she just came in here and started renovating the house without pulling permits and things like that originally.
No, it was just
No.
addition, it was a scope of work addition.
Right.
Ma'am.
Just a couple of things. There used to be, the borough had, until the Harb blew up over the railing aspect, we had a historic preservation consultant, Suzanne Stallings, and she reviewed the permits specifically from the standpoint that you're asking about. What's the significance of it? What's the change being proposed, and is it appropriate? And she would give a report back to the Harb. That position has been eliminated, and as you see, it's hard for someone else to pick up who doesn't have a background in that to answer your questions, because there's a lot to learn, and the ordinance is there. Number two is that the work continued, and is, if you look at the materials, it is, it looks totally out of place, even regardless of what you think about the neighborhood. Most of us are trying to restore the neighborhood. That's why there's projects going on to restore things that are missing from buildings. We don't want to go the opposite direction. And painting your formstone is not helping the situation. Formstone actually locks moisture in and creates a problem for the underlying brick and effervescence inside, and lots of times creates problems inside the structure. So painting formstone is even worse because you're creating more of a moisture barrier. So it was, formstone, Baltimore, like you said, refer to that. They're leaving it go because that was put in the 1950s, and taking it off, you could have more damage than you could possibly afford to fix. So they leave it on, but they don't paint it. So those are the things. Just the fact that the work continued, and it's totally, the raw materials were outside, and the workmanship and the look of it is just not
Well,
appropriate.
to clarify,
Not appropriate for the neighborhood.
to clarify, just everything you said is correct except for, the applicant was given permission by me to paint the facade.
And I think that was wrong, but that was your call.
Yep.
May I just ask, are you speaking as some sort, are you an expert? Are you just speaking, are you here today as a matter of the public or?
Yeah, North Star, we actually, in fact, we have passed the ordinance on Borough Council 25 years ago, 20 years ago. So all these things were reviewed carefully back then. And we also have 2 historic structures in that block that she's talking about that we've been restoring for the last, my family for the last 60 years. So there's, as far as historic preservation, yeah, I have learned a lot and I continue to learn a lot. But, I see what people are doing. The block of Locust Street is considered one of the finest examples of federal architecture outside of Philadelphia. And these buildings keep getting altered, or people think, oh well, they just leave it go, keep making more changes on buildings that are already have been butchered. It's taken away from the value of the block. It's probably the oldest block. Actually, her house is older than what she thinks. It's from 1815. And yes, the formstone was put on in the 1950s, but the underlying structure is still historic.
So really,
On the block then?
Yeah, absolutely. I've lived there my whole life.
so the problem here is that had this come before Harb, before the work was started, we could have reviewed the application, we could have possibly come up with something that was more, we could have possibly recommended a project that was more historically appropriate than actually what was there and what is now there. We could have recommended a new porch that would look more like an original porch. And at this point, that's not happening. So I mean, this creates a real problem when we have to consider things after the fact, because I don't think we're creating a precedent, because we're kind of outside of the way the ordinance actually works. That said, the work has already been done, the money's already been spent. Are we going to make this person change this stuff back to the way it was? Or are we going to just let it go and say, let's do better next time? I'll put that out to the board.
Will there be a next time? I mean, it's like, I see exactly what you're saying. I don't want to operate under the fact that, okay, we're operating under the confines of 130.15, we're good. So now, we've had this happen before. We can't really even go back and, I can't make a visual of what that looked like before. And from what I'm seeing out of that one picture, it's very difficult for me to make a decision whether is this adding to the historical value of the neighborhood, is it keeping it the same? Because it's really hard. I see what you're saying, guys. It's hard to make a decision.
It is. It's a difficult position because we're not adding to the historical value of the neighborhood, whereas we could have been.
Well, I mean, that's kind of hard to say that just a porch railing could have benefited the whole neighborhood. We've already got painted cornerstone.
Well, in the
sanding,
example
seam,
of my home, I took a 1950s tin railing and returned it to original recreated wooden beams. That was making that property more historically accurate.
But
This
no,
is making
rest
the
of it
property,
changed?
yes, the whole thing was turned back to an original.
Right, but I mean.
This is going kind of more towards a new, more modern.
Right.
But if you think about it, we've already had meetings where they've come in and there's buildings that were beyond repair. And it was decided that we're gonna put vinyl windows in it because that's what needs to be done. And the whole thing is about restoring the neighborhood and making the neighborhood look better. Because there's a property that's being done right now that needs that, so it's gonna look better, it's gonna fit, it's gonna be made to be safe for habitants because it was full of lead paint. And they did things to remediate the lead. This, we're coming in and we're trying to dress it up, make it look nicer, fit more towards the time, but it's not a significantly historical building. It's not like we're gonna say we're gonna go into one of the buildings that's very architectural and we're gonna rip off the facade and put something else on. I mean, I think that until we have a map of what is contributing and what is not, I mean, sometimes you have to say what you're gonna save and what you're not gonna save. I mean, that's my world. I mean, if you look at it, if you take both these houses side by side, the one on the left is gonna appraise for a lot more than the one on the right. One has a lot more resellability than the other. I mean, you're also supposed to be trying to revitalize a neighborhood and make it where people want to put the money into some of the structures. But it's considered okay to board up windows. I mean, I understand that there might have been a mistake, but I also think this is somebody trying to revitalize the area. And I don't think that a staff member was able to make the decision saying, well, this is historical compared to other things. I mean, I get that it's a historical structure, but how do we make it conform to today's use?
Councilwoman.
I'm sorry, I'm trying.
I'm sorry, I did one call on you, I
I just
apologize.
wanted to go back to what you said, Mr. Lutz, about the after the fact stuff, because I had been encouraging for some time how we can come up with a way to let people know that they bought a home or they're preparing to buy a home in the historic district, either through the realtors or posting a note on the door when it goes up for sale or something. They need to understand that they're in the historic district, and as such, they need to follow our rules. That was one thing. We do have money in the budget, I believe, for you guys to make a decision to, I don't know, print literature or something like that, something that would let people know, because I think oftentimes they find out like this after the fact, we're stuck with it, and a fine isn't making it go away. So I don't think the fines are really helping anyone. The other thing I just wanted to add is, with regard to the painting of the cornerstone, I still believe, according to the definition of alteration, that should have come to Harb to decide. And if you say, oh, then that's okay, that's your recommendation. I don't agree, with all due respect to everyone involved, I don't agree that one person who is not seated actually on Harb could bypass that review, according to the definition that we have. It's any material. It's not just saying, well, if you think formstone is not, well, if you guys decide you think it's not, that's different, but I just don't think one person should have been able to authorize the go-ahead on that and bypass the hard review of that. That's where I have a problem with it. But
regardless of where you fall, and I understand what Councilwoman is saying, there is a section within the Harb District Ordinance, color of buildings, which specifically states that Harb does not make decisions on the color of buildings, but can when...
I'm not suggesting color. I was suggesting a review of the unpainted surface.
Oh!
It's very
Now
clear. Unpainted, any previously unpainted surface must have a Harb review. And that was bypassed.
It also does free structures.
And I guess what staff determined was that Permastone was not...
But it won't say.
Right, but I'm saying, I don't understand why staff determined that. That's
Frame structures.
That's where I
It
was
doesn't
on.
pick it up.
Is this a frame structure? No.
Is the house a
There, it's not, is it? Because I get nitpicky on this, but our ordinance says that it has to be a frame structure before we review it. And I don't believe it is, so I think, I don't think it is. And I will go back, I do want to go back to the original thing. I read your memo, there was a building permit issued for the remodeling and stuff. So a this says a building permit was issued, so this is covered under this ordinance. It didn't say what kind of building permit, it just says building permit. So we're good. We are good with that, but we do need to address that because in the future, there is a building permit issued. Doesn't say what kind, it just says a building permit issued. But we have reviewed some where there were no building permits. But there was a building permit issued.
I just stress this comment about the not knowing which buildings are significant, which aren't. And that goes back to when the National Storage District was created in 1981. There's a whole detailed survey, Paul, you know, I'm sure this is saved somewhere. Each property that's in the National Storage District was cataloged and described in 1981, the significance of it, when it was built, the characteristics that were on it, and then it's given a rating as far as significance, and then that's all part of what was used to be reviewed by the historic consultant, and they could come back to, like you're saying.
Well, is this building on that list?
Yes.
That's this information, so we have that original book.
But also gives it a significance to it. So some buildings are more contributing than others as far as, that's what they were in 1981, but doesn't mean you want to keep losing the significance of buildings. They still contribute to a row or to a block or to whatever. It may not be, it may have been altered, but does the building, as far as the character of the neighborhood, does it lend to it? Is it part of the progression of the neighborhood?
Does your state on there a significance? Because one of my issues as reviewing this as a staff person was in the survey where it talks about condition, integrity, and significance for these properties for 142 and 144, it was blank.
No, it's not blank. It says it was significantly altered even in 1981.
Well, right, but there's nothing, there are columns
Oh, I
that,
see what you're saying.
there are columns that
Because it had been so,
and it's blank.
it had been so even by 1981, but you still don't want to keep, you don't want to keep adding to more and more.
So,
Yeah.
and the problem is, guys, that's not what our ordinance says. We need more direction. So, you know, we're looking at that book, we're looking at that survey.
I don't fault you. Yeah, it's too much.
And so there are gotta be some just housekeeping items that we can implement just to make this easier so that we know that we're not contributing to the deterioration of contributing structures.
So let's bring this full circle then, and let's talk about this railing. I think had this come before the board here, before the work was done, I think I personally would have recommended probably no railing. I think just the post probably would have been fine, but maybe a railing that that would be more historic in nature would be more appropriate, but I do like the posts over the neighboring properties, 1950s style, not wrought iron.
Castellino.
Castellino, that's what I was looking for. I think that would have gotten us closer to where we would have wanted to be.
I think my problem is, and I'm gonna say something's probably not completely right, but we're taking a house that even in 1980 was considered an ugly duckling because it had been renovated.
Definitely does not make it not.
Well, what I'm getting at is they said it wasn't significant because of all of the changes that had been made to it. It wasn't contributed to the argument. It had formstone on it, no one said anything blocking it, the aluminum railings put on it. If you look, the house to the right has a Home Depot door on it. At least it's
old.
What?
That was just renovated by flippers.
Well, but that's a cheap flipper, and I can definitely say I do know her work. And her work is excellent, and she takes a lot of care of trying to make sure things look correctly. So I would not put her in the category of a flipper. She does do a lot of pride in what she puts out. So that's why it has a door that probably costs her $1,000 instead of the door next to it that costs $200. This wooden post that's on here, the post costs more than all of the vinyl over here. So I understand we're trying to stay within a zoning, but we're dealing with something that was changed and altered so many times. Why are we not trying to make it more fresh so that people want to live in it? It's resellable. It makes people want to live in the neighborhood because, the one is not really sellable. The other one is going to be very marketable, get people that want to be part of the neighborhood. And that's how we get people to revitalize the neighborhood, is to get people to move in. I don't understand why. I understand why people are upset by things being changed, but this house is something that needs to be corrected. It's not historical in its condition that it's in now.
To go along with that point, I think that what was taken out and removed was a non-historic and non-contributing railing.
Correct.
And what was put in is non-historic and non-conforming, but I don't see that it should be a violation. She didn't take out a historic feature and replace it with something modern.
So there are houses in this district that have beautiful iron railings that are actually hand forged. So that's not what was there. So putting a metal roof on it and dressing it up, it's going to look like it fits. It's going to be more modern. And I think the staff basically made the right choice. According to what they have to work with. We don't have a manual that says how this is to be done. This is a relatively new group. But would you rather have boarded up houses, or would you rather have ones that are valuable and properly restored?
As it looks, first let me say, this has nothing to do about money. We do have a appeals board for that. So if she doesn't want to pay the fines or whatever, it's not for us to make a decision, it goes to appeals. Secondly, I disagree with your comment. Historic homes and buildings in a historic district are designed to stay historic. If I wanted to, I could increase the value of this whole area by putting brand new structures everywhere. Because they're worth more. They're modernized, up to date, they're worth more. It's the aesthetics of the historic nature that we're trying to preserve. So it's either as is or backwards. But moving forward and saying that's okay because it's a better selling thing, we want to attract the people who want to buy homes in the historic district who are in favor of the historic district. As President Wood says, he's taking the time to remodel this home. Sharon and other people in the historic district are buying these homes because they're historic and in that district. That's the style of home. So by us upgrading it and saying, making it better, in our opinion, newer, defeats the whole purpose of the historic district. So,
Can I ask you a question? So by your way of thinking, it should have stayed unpainted formstone with shingle roof, the old wood
honestly,
windows.
I don't know this property. I didn't see any pictures, I don't know the property. What I'm saying is, I understand the change in windows. We allowed the wood windows to go to vinyl windows. Because that's an expense that, my windows are air blows right through. So I understand that, giving that clause. But you still want when you look at the front of the property, you still want the visual characteristics. If it hasn't, and I understand in 1981, it was marked down as, it was already modified or whatever, okay? But in my opinion then, either stays that perception, so they may have to do some cosmetic work to fix that area up, but it should be modernized. If anything, it should go backwards. I know there's homes that minus the windows, they're taking off stuff, or you yourself, John, had said, you went from the metal railing back to the more original wood railing, because that's what that home calls for. So the historic district, in my opinion, should stay either as is or go backwards. But as far as the fines, as far as I'm concerned, you guys should be considering fines, or whether it should be fined, whether it should be fined. That's up to the person.
There are no fines being
No, but
mentioned.
I'm saying, if there's a violation, somebody's fined over or whatever, that's up to an appeals board to take care of. The final thing I'll say is, to the owners, I'm sorry, your business. You should know that.
I think at this point, we just have to fall back to the basics. We have to review this as we are required to under the standards. Jessica, I think you pointed out standard 9, correct? Mm-hmm. I think number 6 probably comes into play as well. That deals, everybody have their standards, or talks about deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than placed, blah, blah, blah. You're probably familiar with that. I think that's where we have to make our decision now on those 2 standards. That's what we're use as our guidelines. Number 9, hits it on the head, really. And everybody familiar with that, or it's in our packet, number 9 on page, well, they're not numbers, but is that in your memo, Jessica?
It is.
Okay. It's in the memo that Jessica wrote November 3rd, page 2.
I have it here too, so. Number 9 of the standards, new additions, exterior alterations or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. 6, which I agree, also I think plays a role here, is deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced. Where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, the new feature shall match the old in design, color, texture, and other visual qualities, and where possible, materials. Replacement of missing features shall be substantiated by documentary, physical, and oral evidence. If I were to say anything, this number 6 is why staff felt as though, I would guess, because I was not that staff person, but I would say that 6 is my guess as to why the notice of violation was, why this was tagged as a red flag and we need to have Harb review it.
I just wanted to go back to what Nathan Milton said. I don't know that Harb should even be considering resale value of a property in the historic district. It shouldn't be based on that. It should be based on what our ordinance states. And resale value, I think, can be subjective because you might even actually lower the value of surrounding homes because maybe people don't like what's going in there, but I don't know that that is what's a hard decision.
Remind me, guys, so what was the original porch railing? What was it? It was like that aluminum precast. We know what it was before that. Just for.
I see pictures when I went over to the Historical Society in 1963, and let's see.
That would be my parents.
I'm okay now. Go ahead, continue.
I was just wondering, because, if they're replacing something,
Chances are the house still didn't have a porch.
Probably not.
If I had a porch and she had said, though, even the new material is composite, which I just thought of, that's another thing, you're not allowed to use composite wood either. That was one of the reasons the Harb blew up last time, is trying to put composite railing up instead of wood railing. So even that material isn't allowed.
I thought it was wood. It's
She
not
said
wood.
composite. She said composite.
The posts.
The posts are
It's
Yeah.
pieces of wood that can be glued together.
But that's
micro
composite.
lamp?
They're not cedar.
And the railing itself is what material? Wood, a 2x4. So that's not even exterior grade wood that you put outside.
why was the other railing taken down? What was the reason for that?
It was all rusted out and rotted. The
So it was
house
deteriorating,
The
okay.
house had sat for a year and a half, there was about 2 inches of water.
It was disgusting, that place. Really gross. I've been in there, I stepped on dead mice, it was gross. Very historic.
So really, our guidelines state, if you have a deteriorated item, a feature that requires replacement, the new feature shall match the old, the design, color, texture, and I'm not seeing that match. So it doesn't meet that standard. Just my opinion.
Well, that's kind of the point that I was making, that like realistically by the letter of the law, that cast aluminum type railing should have been what was placed, what was used to make this replacement. Or something that went back even further to a more original style porch, which would have been probably wooden posts and a wooden railing that maybe would have been turned or chamfered or something like that.
Okay. It was according to, I'm a stickler for the ordinance, states that your determination shall be, I'm reading right from the ordinance, determination shall be based on the standards, as well as any design guidelines, which I don't think are really coming into play right now, but they are right after the standards contained herein. And if we determine it appropriate, then we can make suggestions what would make it appropriate. But we're kind of guided by that's why they're called guidelines. We're to be guided by that, and according to the ordinance, we're to base our decision on those standards.
But isn't it to go back to the original, not to what was already replaced at least once?
Not that I've read, doesn't really say anything where you have to go back to. I mean, first of all, I guess my question would be, how will we really truly know what the original, I don't know when that house was built, probably.
Well, ideally,
Yeah, so-
find a picture at the
Yeah.
Historical Society.
Yeah, so we have to really just go by what was replaced, in my opinion. This was what was there, this was what replaced. I mean, I understand going back even further, if we could find something as a suggestion.
I think substantially similar would work in this case.
Looking at the language in section 9, it does note, new work shall be differentiated from the old, that shall be compatible with massing, size, scale. So this supplemental photo helps. What was submitted originally, I don't know if that was enough to make a judgment, but seeing what's here, although I don't think it would be a recommendation, I don't know if I would use the word compatible, but I certainly don't think the mesh is competing or threatening or conflicting necessarily with any.
Well, I think
It does go on to add, though, it says, that architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. And I interpret environment being what's around it. That's just my interpretation.
Right, so in that sense, I'm thinking I appreciate the transparency of this profile of the mesh compared to something that would be much more destructive and conflicting and competing with the style of the house. In some sense, it disappears, which is
Well,
probably
and I
an
think,
improvement over what was there.
I think with the red standing seam roof on there, it sets the porch apart and clearly indicates that it's not historical.
Yeah, I'm focused on the railings.
No, but I mean, I think
Right.
as a whole collective project, back to your original point, that it sort of sets it apart from the original structure.
But originally, if it would have porch roof and it was metal, it would probably have copper standings on it. And in some of these houses back, originally would have had slate roofs on them. So, I mean, that porch roof that's on there is 20 years old. I mean, that roof is probably back from, well, it's older than 20 years. No, but it's not that old. I mean, that porch roof was probably put on in the 90s. Because that's a 20-year shingle. So it hasn't been there for 50 years.
And I was also pulling from the condos out of there. For the whole.
I mean, I personally think it's matching the aesthetics of today for that look, for freshening it up.
Is there any further discussion? Additional questions? Mr. Delcher?
My name is Brian Galford. I don't know a lot of what you were talking about, what I'm trying to piece it together, and a question or two that I have, this gentleman had brought it out. I wanted to know why the project was being done, and he said there was a lot of deterioration. Now, is it also my understanding that the owners, builders, whoever, went in to fix some of that, but also did a bunch of other things that doesn't relate to the historic district? Is that the way I understand it?
There were other interiors, so there was a uniform construction code permit issued for upgrades to the interior systems, mechanical, plumbing.
I'm looking at outside, referring to the historic district. Was there
So the only, they got a permit for the interior work and, for the windows, thank you so much. And there was a permit for, the windows, to do vinyl replacement windows, I'm guessing. And when staff went out to check on the replacement of the vinyl windows is when they saw that the porch had been replaced. The porch railings had been replaced. So that's the only thing that was done outside of scope. But in addition to the replacement windows and then the interior systems being updated.
Okay. And the interior, you don't cover?
No.
No.
Not the Harb.
I just wanted to clear. Yes, my Harb. Okay, thank you. Just trying to understand.
Any further discussion by the board?
Thank you.
Any additional questions, comments, concerns? Do I have a motion regarding 144 Lotus Street?
We'll make a motion to approve the application for the standing seam metal roof, as well as the currently existing railing and mesh profile based on the non-contributing status
Second.
of the existing structure.
So a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Can we read the motion one more time? So I understand the motion again, summarize it real quick.
Approving both the standing seam metal roof and the railing that is currently in place, primarily based on the non-contributing nature of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Prior to these alterations.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
2 nay, 3 right?
Motion carries. Congratulations.
That was just one nay, correct?
It was two.
2 days, 3 ayes, 2 days.
Jonathan.
3
I was
ayes,
okay.
3 pirates and 2 noes.
Could you explain the motion again?
So the motion was to approve both the standing seam roof and the porch railing based on the belief that the building itself is not historically
Contributing.
contributing.
Yeah, correct. The previous state of
So what
these
comes out of that?
components.
So now we'll go to Borough Council for a final approval.
But will they have to change it back?
No.
No.
Not even taking off the chicken wire.
They approved it.
Yeah.
So,
But it's a recommendation,
it's
council.
a recommendation that
It's a
council.
recommendation, we don't make the final
So
decisions.
ultimately, council will have a say in it.
I encourage you to go down and look at it.
I do too.
Please do, yes, please continue.
You can take a tour inside, it's been totally gutted.
Did you put a new roof
I'm very
up
proud
top?
of
It does look nice.
Got rid of all the dead mice too.
It's a bonus.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on down to agenda item number 6. Do we have any questions with the administrative approvals?
I have an addition to make though. 257 North 2nd Street was just issued a violation today because they wrapped the wood trim windows.
I'm sorry, which one?
257 North 2nd Street.
Okay.
So we approved the permit, said no capping, went out, did an inspection. Councilwoman Littner, again, brought that to our attention, thank you so much. So, yeah, they have a notice of violation out, they went above their mandate and wrapped the wood trim window.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comment? Mr. Devitt? You're welcome to use the podium.
I kept hearing about fines. I would think the people that made this ordinance put that in there, that when somebody does something wrong, these fines gotta come into play, so it shows the other people, you better not do that. I mean, it's nice to not want to find anybody that don't need that, but if it's gotta be, the rules were put in there and they were set, that has to be in future things to, protect the board. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any additional public comment? Nora?
I just want to encourage the board and Borough Council to consider hiring a preservation consultant to give you the proper guidance and review of these issues, because it really is important. And on this particular project, well, we see it all over the borough, things get changed. They get changed, and then we're going back after the fact trying to make a remedy, and that's much more difficult. But in this instance, if the least, it's not the proper materials on the exterior, it's not the proper, that look of that chicken wire or what is this, it's totally inappropriate in a rural downtown setting, no matter where you would be. It's not the right look, and even this canyon seam roof, that's gonna stick out, like you said, that's more like a farm style, look. And I can appreciate artistic design, but it's just not, can't take like Derek said, you don't start modernizing stuff just for the sake of modernizing it, so you can sell it, in the future. When you're in a storage district, you get a little bit more than that. And I just encourage you to get some good guidance and make the investment in the staff and are there classes, have they been offering any classes? Continue your education, because there is a lot to learn. But we have a national storage district that has every property described. There's like 1,200 properties that were created in 1981. And those descriptions are important. Someone took the time to write that up. And that helps guide you too. Whether it's been altered or not, like I already said too, it's still part of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Excellent. Appreciate it. Other business. 2024 Harb meeting dates have been set.
with conflicts for February 14th and Ash Wednesday, which is Ash Wednesday and Valentine's Day.
Who cares about Valentine's Day? But Ash Wednesday, it's up to you guys.
I would probably suggest that we either cancel the February meeting, or, I would say either cancel the February meeting, or maybe we can.
Do we have, do either of you two know, do we, or anybody here for that matter, do we have a meeting on the third Thursday here in Chambers? Because we could just bump it to February 15th. So we can check into that, propose a new date. I'd rather propose a new date than cancel the meeting because we have no idea what would be on the agenda.
Let's do that.
Okay, staff will figure out a suitable alternative date. And this is not on here for other business, but I'm being very serious. Staff is already working with the Planning Commission to do updates to the zoning ordinance. We should also be reviewing updates with your entity, organization here, on a regular basis starting next month. So what I would ask of all of you is please pull together thoughts that you have on the critical updates and then the non-critical, this could wait until we have a consultant who can help us walk through these issues, kinds of things. Does that make sense for everybody? Fabulous.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, second? Second. Peter seconds. All those in favor? Aye. Motion is adjourned.
Looks like February 15th will work, by the way. There's no meeting. Thanks guys very much.
Thank you, guys.
All of you. That's okay.
Thank you. Sure. Maybe I disagree with you two. They like material. I don't have a problem with in like material.
But it's not in the pond.
No, I'm not saying this. I'm not on this problem. I'm saying like a wood, the Murphy's with wood railing versus composite wood.
Yeah.
To me,
We can't, that's not what it's written, already. You're going there, Eric.